Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Developing a Proper Worldview. This is episode number 80. We're picking up in the middle of our Camp FEMA 2 documentary, which I think is like phase 5 that we're going through, if I remember correctly. It's, well, prior to that, as always, I want to put a little disclaimer on this. If you happen to be catching this video randomly or you're new to my channel, make sure you go back and watch these in order. They're done purposefully in a sequential order. It's important that you do that. We're developing, like building a house brick upon brick. So we had phase 1, which was the gospel. Phase 2, which is creation versus evolution. Phase 3, the American Empire. Phase 4, the 9/11 conspiracy. And then Phase 5, martial law, which is where we're at now. We're kind of looking at the technology, the method, the means by which it appears that persecution will come. Again, this is a biblical issue. If you're 80 videos into this, you know I'm just repeating myself every time, but it's very important that you see these things through a biblical spiritual lens, because God foretold that these events would come to pass. He foretold us about an antichrist system, a beast system that would come in the last days, a one world government that would be antichrist in nature, that would persecute Christians, that would persecute believers and try to rid the world of us. And so everything we see is leading towards that. The way the world works is it's being directed towards that end, towards the end of this one world system, this one world antichrist persecuting system, which God will judge and bring about the return of Jesus Christ. And so in order to properly understand the way things are going, you have to understand the scriptures. And to understand the scriptures, you must be born again. The words that Christ speaks are spiritual words. You have to have spiritual life. You have to have ears to hear. And so as we do that, we're now looking at a section here where we're seeing the kind of technology that exists for persecution purposes. We're seeing the things that a world government could do to track and persecute us. And so the Camp FEMA DVDs or documentaries are doing a great job of exposing that. And so that's where we're at. I'm going to skip the long introduction and we'll just jump right into it. I think we're about halfway done with this Camp FEMA 2 documentary. So without further ado, let's go. Here we go.
The World Health Organization declares a level 6 pandemic, then all of the other mechanisms engage at the national, state, and local level. There are plans through the World Health Organization at the local level that require level 6 before some of the more draconian methods can be implemented.
Mandatory flu vaccinations, or mandatory quarantines, mark a pivotal role in this nation's fight against civil injustice. If a person truly has control over their own body, then how can any government force them to be inoculated against their will? With a simple declaration of a national emergency, the Constitution can be suspended indefinitely.
I work over in this area, and it's an industrial park, so there's not many people around. One day I'm driving around and I see hundreds of people walking down the sides of the road, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. Well, we ran into a police officer, and he said that they had evacuated people from Hurricane Gustav and were housing them here at the Lucent building. They all had their little bracelets on and stuff, and I guess if they weren't in by a certain time, they got locked out. So, and they had the portable bathrooms in there. They had the gate where they locked them in at night and kept everybody else out. For decades, there's been discussion about FEMA detention facilities and how they could be utilized. It was unclear how anybody could be rounded up because it was, assumed that everybody would resist on a mass scale. Well, now we're starting to see scenarios where people would actually demand that their friends and neighbors be rounded up.
Yeah, that's pretty frightening. I mean, how prophetic is this documentary? You know, that 10 years later we'd be going through this sort of scenario here. I think that was probably a test run by the powers that be to, I mean, when we look at what happened here over the last few years, like he mentioned, there was an assumption that people would resist, but we've now learned, and they've learned, that that's not true. That when people are sufficiently fearful, they will do as told. And so that's pretty frightening, because when the New World Order becomes aware of that, as they are now, it's pretty easy to see, or easy to assume, that they're going to implement that on a bigger scale, on a more massive, permanent scale, because they know it works now. They know, look, like, we don't really need military force to get compliance. We just need to scare people. If we scare them, they'll do as they're told. They'll go where they're told. They'll give up what freedoms we tell them they have to. So the control grid system that's in place because of like the technology exists to lock down the whole world, to track and trace everything we do, and now they know they can get compliance, which just makes it so it's the way you can see that we're on the verge, or at least the conditions are ripe for an authoritarian system to take complete control, and we're living in that. It would seem to me that it's very near. You know, it's coming. Now the Lord could delay it as long as He wants, but everything's in place, I would think. They have, the only thing that's left is the implantable chip, which they could use a fear scenario to then cause that. Which, again, what happened over the last couple of years was kind of a test run to see people will give up their health freedom. They'll take what we tell them to take. So if people are sufficiently scared of an outbreak of terrorism, whatever it is, and we tell them, look, in order to keep you safe, we need everybody to be tracked. So we need everybody to take this implantable microchip. That, what in the past people might have thought there's no way people won't go along with that, we now see, yeah, they will go along with that. It's a reality.
This is a new virus. It has skipped from one animal species to another. This has a little bit of bird, a lot of pig. It's in humans. It is new to most Americans. It is going to cut a swath through those who have no immunologic memory for it. What I worry about is that there's enough distrust of the American government, and people are trillioned out and numb over the Wall Street thing, and they're going to look at Big Pharma and go, please, just another way to make a buck, and they're going to go, don't tell me what to do.
You had the H1N1 vaccine that was fast-tracked, skipping all but the most preliminary tests of safety and effectiveness, while at the same time, the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services signed a document that gave legal immunity to the vaccine manufacturers and officials alike.
Under the provisions of a 2006 law for public health emergencies, vaccine makers and federal officials will be immune from lawsuits that result from any new swine flu vaccine.
Then the mainstream media is reporting that the military is prepared to assist civilian authorities.
The military is expected to put together teams across the country to deal with a possible outbreak this fall.
Fox News has confirmed that Northcom has a proposal sitting on the desk of Secretary of Defense Robert Gates that would authorize the military to back up FEMA should there be an H1N1 pandemic. The proposal comes from Northcom Commander Victor Renoir, who wants permission to set up 5 regional military teams who will respond if FEMA says it needs help.
The plan called for military task force to work in conjunction with FEMA. You know, at the same time they're going through all these training scenarios where military and law enforcement are facing angry citizens.
There is no proof that the government is building detention camps around the country.
Then about the same time, you had scientists, health officials, law enforcers, first responders, and other experts that gathered to discuss pandemic response at the International Swine Flu Conference.
The World Health Organization is holding emergency meetings and may declare a worldwide pandemic.
Some of the breakout sessions included topics such as psychological issues, like unwillingness to follow government orders.
And the Constitution says the police can't break into your home, and the police can't take your children away from you, and parents decide what medication the children get, not the government.
Then in Oklahoma, we found that there are administrative rules that say that you can be forcibly vaccinated against your will. Basically, it says that you can be taken immediately into custody and for the purposes of treatment or examination.
And once he declares an emergency, he can authorize non-healthcare licensed personnel, read that to mean police, to vaccinate people against their will.
So this means that you and your family can be forcibly vaccinated against your will, all on the orders of a single unelected official, the health commissioner. This completely bypasses all checks and balances. Subsequent sections address the issue of isolating people at home, hospitals, or alternate facilities. Well, Andrew Griffin from RedditReport.com here in Oklahoma went looking for answers from the Oklahoma State Department of Health. He spoke to Larry Weatherford, and when asked about alternate facilities that would be utilized, Larry stated the old Lucent Technologies building in western Oklahoma City, where Hurricane Gustav evacuees were housed. Well, the Lucent Technology building is located in western Oklahoma City. It's a huge building, lots of open warehouse space, almost completely surrounded by barbed wire fence with secured gates that have guard shacks beside them. And then in the back, there's rail access, which meets the criteria of what people call a FEMA concentration camp. I mean, there's no sign out front that says FEMA concentration camp, but it's one of these deals where it's this gray area. But immediately that when they wanted to utilize it, it could be put into effect.
So I think I mentioned this before, but I saw something that they want to use, like Walmarts. Walmarts are in cahoots with this. A couple of years back, there were even reports of Walmarts being taken over by the military, and we may have watched that on one of these documentaries. I don't recall, but and how they can use the Walmart internal ordering system to like order munitions and supplies and stuff like that. So. You can just easily visualize how this will come into play. Something scary will happen in the world, and the government will come out and say, look, we've got lockdowns, we need everybody to report here or do this or that, and we need everybody to take this or that. And what was mind-blowing to me, and I guess it shouldn't have been, with what we've recently gone through, is how all the governments of the world were working hand in hand. Like the same process was being played out from country to country. So it's not an American issue. America leads the charge often, but it's a worldwide empire, a beast system, and I'm getting chills thinking about it. It's like you can just visualize how easily this can take place.
For decades, people have talked about FEMA detention facilities, but it's always been, a point of contention on how people would be able to be rounded up in these, because everyone assumes that there would be mass resistance to it. Well, now we're starting to see scenarios where people would actually demand that their friends and neighbors be rounded up in case of a pandemic, or be it true or false. At least the impression of a pandemic would be enough to initiate that type of behavior. This is behind me is the Lucent building. It's an enormous facility.
It's mind-blowing how just prophetic is the word, how ahead of its time this was. These people understood the game plan, and it played out that way. And like he said, it can be either a real scary event or an imaginary one, because we've seen how the media is controlled by the New World Order. And if the media just keeps reporting scary information over and over again, huge portion of society just buys right into it.
A huge open warehouse space where, previously evacuees from Hurricane Gustav have been housed. It's a large open parking lot areas here with, secure fence all around, barbed wire facing in, and a railroad tracks just a few feet away. You can see where thousands of people could be staged here and loaded on the railroad tracks. They're just a few feet away. They've set up communications already for cellular and various other networks, but you can see where that could be easily converted also in the smokestack behind us. It would only take a few military personnel in strategic locations to really lock this place down. I mean, while there's open access now, it would only take a few hours to really secure this place. A few guards in strategic points, and no one would be able to leave.
The flu virus, or any type of biological threat, is the perfect cover for martial law and control, because it's something that makes everyone a potential threat. It makes everyone a potential carrier, everyone a potential terrorist carrying the terrorist virus. This helps us submit to tyranny. It helps us suspect our neighbors. It helps us see the government as our savior and the arbiter. And it divides the people against each other. Those crazy people, as the CFR has said, that don't want to take the shots, versus the reasonable people that trust their government and understand that we're supposed to roll up our sleeves when we're given that order.
Mind-blowing. It's crazy.
I don't know if it's true, but I've been told that 3 days without food, your neighbors are willing to steal from you. And 6 days without food, your neighbors are ready to kill you. Well, if we create the economic collapse and just wait for a week, we're going to have rampant theft, rampant, assault and murder. And, well, heck, that's clearly an excuse for the government to step in and reestablish law and order. The problem is they're reestablishing their law, their order, where they are in control, and any of us that, disregard a direct order are now shot and killed.
When the economies first started to crash, we knew what was going to happen. There was going to be a government bailout, just like they did in the savings and loan scandal in the late 80s, early 90s. Here in Arizona, we took a hit. We could see the same thing was going to happen. We had really hot real estate. We had the bubble was inflated as much as it could go. They were building more homes than they had people that would even go look at them.
There are many triggers to institute expanded, unconstitutional, federal and international control. And chief among those is an economic collapse. We already saw that in October of 2008 when the Congress wouldn't vote for unlimited money to be given to the very same private banks that had orchestrated the crisis. Secretary of the Treasury at the time, Paulson, went before a closed session and threatened them that martial law would be declared if they didn't submit to what J.P. Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs were doing.
Many of us were told in private conversations that if we voted against this bill on Monday, that the sky would fall, the market would drop 2,000 or 3,000 points the first day, another couple thousand the second day, and a few members were even told that there would be martial law in America if we voted no.
And now they're back to their same old tricks again, saying there's going to be a complete economic meltdown if you don't give us even more power and allow the very banks that engineered the last crisis power over all other financial institutions.
As a senator, Obama supported the nearly $1 trillion Bush TARP program, which gave money to insolvent banks and Wall Street businesses. When his administration took over, Obama ushered in his own $1 trillion America Recovery and Reinvestment Act, 28% of which has been set aside for entitlements. This act was supposed to save our economy by stimulating the economy, creating jobs, and rebuilding infrastructure. Yet the financial crisis has not yet been averted. The housing markets have not recovered. Unemployment still hovers close to 10%. And according to recent figures, those living in poverty in the United States of America is expected to be nearly 15%, a figure not seen since the 1960s. While our nation's debt and gross domestic product are nearly the same percentage, the Obama administration preyed on the fears of many and forced yet another $1 trillion piece of social legislation through Congress. The Affordable Care Act will force the people of the United States to purchase health care or be fined for not having it.
From my point of view, it's the health care, the Obama plan, mandatory health care. If you don't have health care, you're going to be given a $1,000 fine. And for me, one of the scariest aspects is mandatory vaccinations. I worked in a cattle ranch for a period of time, and every year, well, twice a year, we would get all the cattle, and we would give the cattle mandatory vaccinations. And the analogy was not lost on me. You know, the government wants to treat us like cattle, wants to line us up, and wants us to take these vaccinations whether we need it or not.
The way you get Americans into camps, you can't do, roundups won't be successful like they were in World War II Germany, where they first disarmed the Jews and then did whatever they wanted with the Nazi soldiers. They had an easy time rounding them up. Here you can't do that, because if you get people shooting back, it's you know, and the word gets around this is going on, it's going to be unsuccessful. So probably in America, you'll need to have an ultra-massive economic collapse to coax people to persuade them to come into the camps. That would be, so economic hardship is the way to do that. If people are starving and have nowhere to go, the tent city will not sound as good to them as a FEMA camp.
The economy being in shambles, so many people being unemployed, has left a lot of people hurting, frustrated, angry, and looking for a reason why they are in the place they're in. In addition, I think that a great many people out there are very angry over things like the bank bailouts, the bailout of the auto industry. You know, what they see, I think, is a government simply pouring money into the hands, really, of the elites, of people who then go on to get bonuses of millions of dollars at the end of the year, and they don't feel that what the government has done to try and end the recession is really reaching real working people. So there's a great deal of anger and frustration out there, and that is being channeled sometimes by conspiracy theories or by scapegoating certain groups into this kind of rage we are seeing all across the country.
The most sickening aspect of this whole Homeland Security system is the fact that over 1,200,000 Americans are on the no-fly list. No judge, no jury, no witnesses. You don't know how you got on the list. You can't get off the list. It's the benchmark, the hallmark of a tyranny, that there are secret lists for dissidents.
In spring of 2010, the Southern Poverty Law Center posted reports called Rage of the Right and Meet the Patriots on their website. Meet the Patriots profiles 40 individuals that the Southern Poverty Law Center sees as being at the heart of the resurgent patriot movement. Furthermore, our federal government, as well as the mainstream media, looks at the Southern Poverty Law Center as the ultimate watchdog for people that could potentially be domestic threats to our country's security.
Has there been a rise in hate crimes, etc.?
Well, there has definitely been a rise in threats towards the president, in domestic terrorism aimed at the president, and at hate speech essentially revolving around the idea that we have a black man and his black family in the White House. So that's undeniable. I mean, we've seen skinhead assassination plots, a guy who wanted to set off a dirty bomb at the inauguration, and a whole long list. Many of the cases you mentioned, like the man who murdered 3 officers in Pittsburgh, were also influenced by this anti-Obama atmosphere.
In his article about the Southern Poverty Law Center, Chuck Baldwin states that the information and reports disseminated by Southern Poverty Law Center wind up in police reports and bulletins all over the United States, pointing out that the Southern Poverty Law Center probably played a big role in the infamous February 2009 MIAC report.
An anti-tax demonstration is scheduled for downtown's Keener Plaza April 15th. But charges are flying that one of the organizing groups is an extremist anti-government group.
The group is the Constitution Party, and they run candidates for, among other...
It's interesting. I mean, you can obviously see who they're targeting and where that's heading. It's always right-wingers, people who believe in the Constitution, people who believe in free speech, people who believe in the right to bear arms, people that are pro-life, people that are anti-homosexual, and all of those things are blended in with Christianity. You always hear the terms conservative and Christian tied right in, right wing and Christian tied right in. So this is all, it's they can't come out right and say we're against Christ, but that's where it's moving as they demoralize society, and society becomes further and further away from biblical ethics and biblical morality. They're at the same time demonizing good, wholesome lifestyle. They're demonizing biblical Christianity, where eventually it's not just going to be constitutionalists and Second Amendment people. It's going to just flat out be, if you are they won't just go and say a Christian, because they're still going to have fake Christians. You know, your big mega churches, your pro-LGBT women pastors nonsense. You're still going to have that they'll call the good Christians, you know, those that are blending in with society, but they're going to call us the extremists, those that take the scriptures seriously, that believe homosexuality is a sin, that believe in the sanctity of life, that believe Jesus Christ is the only way. They're going to say those are the terrorists, those are the enemies, and that's who's going to be targeted.
Offices, Mayor of St. Louis, congressional seats, and several statewide Missouri offices. But the Anti-Defamation League, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and at one point the Missouri Highway Patrol all labeled the Constitution Party an anti-government extremist organization.
I think we'd consider it a fringe right-wing political party that we consider to have extremist roots.
Last month, the Missouri Highway Patrol issued an intelligence report warning local Missouri law enforcement to keep an eye on radical organizations, and those included the Constitution Party.
Several of those named in the two reports are veterans, former law enforcement officials, politicians, and even a couple of Fox News personalities. These are interspersed with a handful of independent journalists, including film producer Gary Franchi and militia members. In their spring 2010 intelligence report, the Southern Poverty Law Center claimed to have identified 512 patriot groups. The report states that being categorized as a patriot group doesn't make them an advocate of violence or hate, yet the Southern Poverty Law Center, a group of self-confessed national hate watchers, was quick to claim these groups are anti-government extremists. Founded by Morris Dees and Joseph Levin in 1971 for the purposes of ensuring the rights of minorities, the Southern Poverty Law Center claims to be an organization dedicated to fighting hate and bigotry and to seeking justice for the most vulnerable members of society.
They're modern-day Nazis.
What would the Southern Poverty Law Center hope to gain by naming and profiling individuals in their Meet the Patriot report? Top-ranked Baldwin, Franchi, and others wonder about the possibility that the Southern Poverty Law Center is a front organization for Big Brother. These patriots are in the forefront, fighting for this nation's constitutional rights. The Southern Poverty Law Center seems bent on demonizing any American citizen or group who feels that the federal government is not adhering to this country's ultimate law, the Constitution.
That FEMA, for instance, is running a secret series of concentration camps in order to imprison Americans, or that President Obama is secretly planning re-education camps for our children. Those kinds of ideas, certainly not in all cases, but in some percentage of cases, drive people to feel that they have to defend their kind of freedoms, their liberty, at the point of a gun.
The Southern Poverty Law Center labels patriots as people who generally believe that the federal government is an evil entity that is engaged in a secret conspiracy to impose martial law.
Specifically, where do you get proof, aside from some isolated incidents, that this is a growing trend across the country?
Sure, fair enough question. I don't think it's at all isolated. We've got not only reports, all kinds of evidence of these groups actually doing training in the woods as they did back in the 90s.
Completely overlooked by the Southern Poverty Law Center is information published in an article in the now-defunct Radar magazine. In the article, The Last Roundup, is government compiling a secret list of citizens to detain under martial law. Christopher Ketchum reports that the Continuity of Government program encompasses national emergency plans that would trigger the takeover of the country by extra-constitutional forces. In short, it's a roadmap for martial law. No one knows very much about the continuity of government program. Representative and Homeland Security Committee Chairman Benny Thompson and committee member Pete DeFazio sought to review the documents, but were denied, pressing DeFazio to go public, stating, "Maybe the people who think there's a conspiracy out there are right." Ketchum also talks about MainCore, a database that a knowledgeable source says contains information on 8 million Americans. Specifically, Ketchum quotes his source as saying, "The database can identify and locate perceived enemies of the state almost instantaneously. In the event of a national emergency, these people could be subject to everything from heightened surveillance and tracking to direct questioning and possibly even detention."
They got technology beyond that now. They've got, years ago I was hearing about the smart street lamps that they were installing that had microphones and cameras. They have the computer technology now to track everybody, not 8 million, everyone. Everyone's tracked. From your gait, the way you walk, you can be identified. Facial recognition. I just saw a post earlier on TikTok of a guy filming in Portland trying to go into some store, and there's a facial recognition camera that won't allow you in until you look up at it and it identifies you. All of us, we've all plastered our pictures and videos all over social media. That's all used to identify us. Everything's listening to you. We all know that. We all get ads after talking about stuff. So we're all being tracked and traced, and everything is you're in this big computerized lockdown system, and they're talking about smart cities now, and the technology's crazy, man. They have the ability to track everything we do.
Resurgent patriots understand that the definition of a national emergency remains rather vague. According to Department of Defense documents and past executive orders, it could be as simple as riots or natural disasters, to the more complex insurrections or nationwide opposition to a U.S. military invasion overseas. Resurgent patriots are also concerned with the warrantless electronic surveillance and spying programs during which the federal government bypassed existing laws to data mine the communications of American citizens on U.S. soil. This information, along with information from other sources, gives the so-called resurgent patriots and patriot groups credibility, plausible reason for concern, and paints a sinister picture of the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization out not to protect the most vulnerable members of society, but to suppress, degrade, and list anyone who openly questions the federal government's actions.
Another controversial report and more damage control from the Department of Homeland Security, the same department that issued a report suggesting returning war veterans were susceptible to extremist groups, also issuing what it calls the, quote, domestic extremism lexicon, end quote. It's like a dictionary with definitions for various extremist or terrorist groups and some definitions. Here's an entry: anti-immigration extremism. The Department of Homeland Security's definition: people who are, quote, highly critical of the U.S. government's response to illegal immigration and oppose government programs that are designed to extend rights to illegal aliens, such as driver's licenses and in-state tuition. Here's another one: single-issue extremist groups. According to the DHS dictionary, there are individuals who focus on a single cause, such as animal rights or the environment. They are also described as special interest extremists.
But the reality is the Department of Homeland Security is supposed to be defending us against another attack from Islamic terrorism. That's the reason this department was created. And yet it appears to be the gang that can't shoot straight. And also, to me, it's missing its purpose. You went through all those different definitions of different type of extremists. Nowhere in that dictionary do you see the term Islamic extremist.
It came to light last week that the state of Pennsylvania paid an Israeli-based company, the Institute of Terrorism Research and Response, $125,000 to compose a list of opponents of gas drilling and tax protesters to fulfill the State Department of Homeland Security federal mandate. When the matter was brought to the attention of Pennsylvania Governor Ed Rendell, he claimed to be appalled and embarrassed that his office was tracking and circulating information about legitimate protests. At a press conference, he made this declaration. Let me make this as clear as I can make it. Protesting against an idea, a principle, a process is not a real threat against infrastructure. Protesting is a God-given American right, a right that is in our Constitution, a right that is fundamental to all we believe in as Americans. Well, unless, of course, you were protesting against the G20 in the governor's state last year.
I think whenever you begin to look at what took place under the regime of Adolf Hitler, what took place under Mao's China and Stalin's Russia, and on, the pattern of before you can persecute a people, before you can incarcerate large numbers of people, you have to marginalize them. You have to create the image that these people are dangerous to society, or they're extremists or radicals, call them what you will, but marginalize them from the mainstream of society so that at that point the rest of society will accept the persecution that might result upon this group.
In June 2010, Enemy of the Constitution-loving Americans and MSNBC's Hardball host Chris Matthews did a piece on the Tea Party movement, Oath Keepers, Alex Jones, militias, birthers, and other patriot groups, referring to them as the New Right. He says this new movement grew from a group having mere political differences with the left to a group enraged at the Obama administration, considering the federal government an occupying force rather than a legitimate administration, and seems to harbor class and racial resentment. Matthews is also concerned with, as he puts it, their need for their Second Amendment rights. Matthews takes great offense to the adoption of the Gadsden flag as the symbol of the group, saying it scares him. In an interview about his documentary, Rise of the New Right, Matthews points out that there were even congressmen and congresswomen on the balcony of the Capitol building waving the Gadsden flag and inciting the crowd to protest the federal government. In the documentary, he takes his opportunity to point out the common thread running through these new writers, a fear that their personal rights are being threatened, their dislike of our nation's economic situation, government overspending, the huge national debt, and their dislike of what they see as America becoming. Matthews seems to forget that in the United States of America, we do have the right to be distressed, question authority, protest egregious acts committed by the federal government, and yes, to be armed.
FEMA has been given the authority to declare martial law wherever they are deployed. And that is a very powerful authority, in that, as you should know, when martial law is declared, that your constitutional rights are dismissed.
New questions tonight about an Army combat brigade being trained to deal with civil disturbances in the United States. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 generally prohibits federal uniformed services from carrying out domestic law enforcement duties, except in cases expressly authorized by the Constitution or an act of Congress. Critics say the brigade's training goes against one of the founding principles of our country, separation of military and civilian government.
They've spent 30 months on the streets of Baghdad. Now the 1st Brigade Combat Team of the Army's 3rd Infantry Division is back in the USA. The Army Times reporting, quote, They may be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control or to deal with potentially horrific scenarios, end quote.
May be called upon to help with civil unrest and crowd control.
The question arises why? And isn't that what the National Guard does?
Infantry brigade is designed to engage an enemy with maximum effective force and destroy it. That's not the sort of thing anybody wants to see in the streets of the United States.
Almost 5,000 strong, the brigade is based at Fort Stewart, Georgia, under control of Northern Command.
One of its specialties is counterinsurgency. This is a radical departure from separation of civilian law enforcement and military authority and could, quite possibly, represent a violation of law.
Historically, the posting is unusual. In modern history, Army troops have been used at extraordinary junctures. Under the first President Bush to contain the 1992 riots in Los Angeles, under President Lyndon Johnson in response to Detroit's 1967 riots, and in the grips of a depression by President Herbert Hoover to contain Army veterans demanding their bonuses.
The United States of America were generally isolationists during World War II. Wanting to gain citizen support to get involved in the war, Lieutenant Commander Arthur McCollum drafted his 8-action memo in October 1940, the purpose of which was to provoke a Japanese attack against the United States, causing U.S. citizens to demand entry into the war. The actions caused the desired effect, resulting in the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. In March 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff drafted a plan to create public support for a war with Cuba. Operation Northwoods called for the CIA and other such groups to carry out terroristic attacks against U.S. bases and cities and implicating Cuba by planting false evidence. According to the records, the plans were never implemented, but they do bear a striking resemblance to the attacks of September the 11th, 2001. The official account of the September 11th attacks has been the source of ongoing debate for more than 9 years. The video and photographic evidence does not support the official story.
That was not American Airlines! That was not American Airlines!
Former Florida Senator Bob Graham stated that there was information that had not been made available to the public for which there are specific, tangible, credible answers, and that the cover-up led to the heart of the administration. The crisis of September the 11th saw a major shift in security and other legislation and has nearly single-handedly brought about the end of privacy in the United States. USA Patriot Acts 1 and 2 intruded on no less than 5 of the first 10 Bill of Rights. The John Warner Defense Act saw the end of posse comitatus. The Military Commissions Act saw the end of habeas corpus. And the Real ID Act, attached to an emergency appropriations bill, passed.
One thing I don't understand, I've never understood, is why do they go through the pretense of passing these bills, you know? These bills that strip Americans of their constitutional freedoms are really unnecessary. Like, they have the power, the technology, the resource, and the subservient attitude of most Americans to just do whatever they want. You know, and so why go through all the rigmarole of passing bills and acts? I've heard one thing, and we'll probably get into it down the road when we start looking at the occult foundation of this. But part of the occult teachings is that they're required, you know, spiritually speaking, because they're under control of principalities and powers. One of their requirements is that they have to announce what it is that they're going to do, and that's why you see they use satanic symbols and things like that for their company logos, and in their books they tell you what's going to have to, what they're planning and what they're doing. And why there's things like predictive programming in movies and television where they tell you ahead of time what's coming, because part of the occult agenda is like they have to, if I understand it correctly, they have to have a willingness of the people to subject themselves to their tyranny. And so when they announce ahead of time and there's no resistance, it's kind of like a loophole for them. They're telling you what's going to happen, knowing nobody's really going to pay attention. Nobody's going to go and read Carol Quigley's big 800-page book, or go read Rockefeller's memoirs. Not too many people are going to do that. But when they do that, when they announce those things ahead of time, they're following their occult practices, their occult rituals. And so I think maybe I don't know, but maybe that's why they go through the pretense of passing laws and stuff, so that they feel like they're upholding their occult principles.
With virtually no debate. Also passed during this time, and attributed to the need for tighter security, was the FISA Amendment Act, which gave retroactive immunity to the major telecoms for their role in turning over massive amounts of cell and email communications to United States security agencies at their request. No warrant needed. Precedents have been set with regard to war, but what about other things? Many have said for years that there's a plot to move to a new world order, one world government. What if that were the plan? There have been several instances in the past where politicians and leaders have mentioned a plan for a new world order, but none so blatantly as England's Gordon Brown at the G20 summit held in London in April 2009.
His eyes just look evil. Look at that.
Brown summed up a portion of the meeting by saying, "I think a new world order is emerging, and with it, the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation."
Your name is Tom.
Just look at the statue out in front of the UN. I think it's in front of the UN, where they got a like a mechanical globe coming out of a globe. The new world order emerging. Again, it's symbology. They announce what they're gonna do.
You live just off of 5th Street. Nice car, Tom. Nice house. What's not so nice is you owe Pennsylvania $4,212 in back taxes. Listen, Tom, we can make this easy. Pay online by June 18th, and we'll skip your penalty and take half off your interest. Because, Tom, we do know who you are.
It's not a stretch of the imagination. In fact, it's already beginning to happen, where people are being given RFID chips so that we can, scan you. Now, they always try to present a good reason for doing that. Well, we'll have your entire medical history. If you fall down unconscious, the doctors will know who you are, what drugs you're allergic to. They'll be able to treat you more efficiently because they have all this information. Well, the opposite is also true. If the government has all this information on you, they can also manipulate you by the use of that information. You won't be allowed to get a job. You won't be allowed to buy food. You won't be allowed to, perform any economic transactions unless you have the government RFID chip and are approved. This is one of the things that people have been worried about for a long time. The technology now exists.
In March 2010, the Obama administration declassified details about the Bush cybersecurity program. The program, initiated by National Security Presidential Directive 54, needs to evolve and become part of an even broader national cybersecurity strategy, according to President Obama. With the population concerned about intrusion, Obama has tried to assure Americans that the government will not monitor private sector networks and internet traffic. Yet part of the program is to enhance awareness of network weaknesses and threats on the federal level, to eventually include state, local, and even private sector. Wired reported what may be of the most concern, especially from an already over-intrusive government, is the need for government to define its roles in protecting private critical infrastructure networks. That infrastructure includes internet service providers, as well as telecommunications, banking, and other networks. It should be noted that the very governmental department that is responsible for cybersecurity, CERT, the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team, has been found to have hundreds of holes within its own security system. In the report on the vulnerabilities, it states that the proper security measures have not been implemented on the mission operating environment that would protect data from unauthorized access, use, disclosure, disruption, modification, or destruction. It might be of interest to note that the agency, founded in 2003 and part of the Department of Homeland Security, is also considered a public-private partnership, like the Federal Reserve.
What is really worrying about a group like the Oath Keepers is this is a group of people who are armed by the rest of society. In the case of police officers, these are people who sometimes have the power of life and death over you or me.
Sickening. You know, it makes me so angry. This man, Oath Keepers are like. So, as a Christian, I'm opposed to violence of any kind. So I don't believe a Christian should be involved in the military or the police because violence is required in those positions. But the Oath Keepers are military and police officers, active duty and retired, that take their oath to the Constitution seriously, that believe in defending the Constitution. They are the real thin blue line between us and tyranny. Those people are heroes, and so for people to make them out to be terrorists or anything, it's sickening. Sickening.
And what that means is if these men and women are animated by ideas that are completely false, completely paranoid and groundless, you've got to worry about who they're going to see as the real enemy and what kinds of decisions they make in stressful situations.
When you look at the Oath Keepers website, the core of it is this business about the orders they're not going to obey. And it starts out with a preamble, a quote from George Washington saying, you know, now is the time, or soon comes the time when it will be determined whether we're slaves or freedmen. Immediately after that, the Oath Keepers website says, presumably in Stuart Rhodes's words, that time is near at hand again.
Southern Poverty Law Center. Heidi Byrick, one of my favorite people. She's a director of special projects. Had her on my radio show several times. And we enjoy each other's company. We talk, we have a good time, but she knows my position, and she knows I understand hers. The reason that she is against Oath Keepers is because they made it clear that they wouldn't follow orders. Really.
Oath Keepers, primarily former military people, are acknowledging this is what the Constitution says. We were trained, as we went through military training, that it was our responsibility to deny an unconstitutional order. So presumably you'd have to be smart enough to know what was and was not a constitutional order. And so they have a list of 10 of them.
Well, it's a declaration of orders, and the whole point of it is to, one, draw some lines in the sand ahead of time and get the current serving military to think about where the line in the sand is. But it's also a reflection of our own Bill of Rights. And so when I read through them, you'll see that, it's mostly a restatement of the Bill of Rights. The first one is we will not obey orders to disarm the American people. And, of course, we had gun disarmament during Katrina. It was a big catalyst for why I started Oath Keepers. But it's also, it's number one on our list, not because firearms and gun ownership is more important than any other part of the Bill of Rights or any other part of our natural rights, but it's because that's the one thing that's more likely to lead to fighting. Second one is we will not obey orders to conduct warrantless searches of the American people. And what that's evoking is, once again, our Fourth Amendment, which was a response to the colonial history of the writs of assistance, which were warrantless search.
Think about how ridiculous that is. All military and police take an oath to defend the Constitution. They're simply restating that oath, saying, since we took an oath, the oath says, defend the Constitution says people have the right to bear arms, so our oath says we won't take people's arms. And you have people like the Southern Poverty Law Center nonsense calling that terrorism or calling that a threat. That's sketchy, man. There's evil people in power.
Searches or general warrants. It's one of the first causes of resistance among the American population back in 1763. And we will not obey orders to detain American citizens as unlawful enemy combatants or to subject them by military tribunal. And the reason why that is there is that post 9/11 in particular, there has been a steady drumbeat an argument coming from the executive branch and backed up by the Supreme Court, unfortunately, that argues that the president can detain American citizens as unlawful combatants in the war on terror and treat them as though they were a foreign enemy, as though they were an Iraqi or an Afghani during the war on terror. So number 4 is we will not obey orders to impose martial law or a state of emergency on a state. And what this is a reflection of our dual sovereignty system. The Constitution sets up a new national government, but as the 10th Amendment makes clear, reserves to the states and the people all powers not granted. And number 5 is we will not invade and subjugate any state that asserts its sovereignty. And that's closely related to number 4. Because we have, under our Constitution, a dual sovereignty system, reserving to the states and the people all powers not granted, that is part of the Constitution we all swore to defend. And so we will not use military force or obey orders to use military force against a state that is simply asserting its constitutionally respected sovereignty and standing on that and defending that principle. And number 6 is we will not obey orders to blockade American cities, thus turning them into giant detention camps. And this is something that, of course, a lot of critics say, well, wait a minute, when's that ever going to happen? Well, historically that happened in the Warsaw ghettos. And that's one of the things that we've done is
if all our military and police took their oath seriously like these guys, we wouldn't have anything to worry about. Because the authoritarian power is the elites. They're so small in number. The only reason they have power is because people follow their orders. You have military and police that do what the state tells them to do. They don't think about their oath to the Constitution. They'll just go and arrest a protester because their boss tells them to. Without thinking, wait a minute, this person has the right to protest. They'll go door to door and confiscate weapons because their boss tells them to. They don't stop and think, wait a minute, the Constitution allows this person to have weapons. If all our military and police took their oath seriously, understood their oath, and stuck true to the Constitution, there's no threat of authoritarianism. That's why I appreciate the Oath Keepers so much.
Look, not only do we have the history that the founders reflected in our Bill of Rights, we also have the 20th century experience, what was done by the Nazis, was done by Stalin and his gulags. And one of the things the Nazis did is that they cordoned off a large section of Warsaw and detained the Jews there and used that as a detention center. All they had to do was blockade it off and post armed guards and post concertina wire around it, and then they starved them out. They tried to starve them to death. Okay, number 7 is we will not obey orders to force Americans into any form of detention camp under any pretext. And this is once again a reflection of our own experience in the 20th century. As we saw what happened in Nazi Germany, as we saw what happened in Stalinist Russia, we saw what happened with Pol Pot in Cambodia. You had people who were forced into detention centers. And even in our own history, the sad history during World War II of American citizens of Japanese descent being rounded up, over 100,000 of them were interned in detention camps in California, Arizona, Oregon, and Washington State. This was done by executive order by FDR, and was carried out by the military generals, General DeWitt on the Western Command, And so we had that precedent, even in our own history. Number 8 is we will not obey any orders to use foreign troops on U.S. soil to keep the peace or maintain control. And the reason why this is on this list is in the founders' experience, it was the use of foreign mercenaries, the Hessians, which was one of the more grievous affronts and led to the Declaration of Independence, quite frankly. They had, even during the fighting after April 19, 1775, there was still hope they could reconcile and remain part of the British Empire. But when the Crown used foreign troops on them, that's when they drew a line and said this is just so outrageous. It's one of the reasons why they separated. Number 9 is we will not obey orders to confiscate the property of the American people, including food and other essential supplies. And once again, this is a recognition and reflection of the fact that denial of food has been used as a weapon in warfare for thousands of years. It's also a reflection of the asserted authority of the president to confiscate property and confiscate food. There have been many executive orders since the Cold War that assert this supposed power of the president to go and seize industries and seize supplies. And even had Truman seizing the steel mills during the Korean War, as it actually happened. And that was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court only because Congress had expressly declared that he couldn't do that. But it left open, wherever Congress has not said no, it's left open, an open question about whether a president can do these things. And so it almost affirmed that he can, under some circumstances, go and seize entire industries. Number 10 is we will not obey orders to infringe on the people's right to assembly, to freedom of speech, freedom of association, and freedom of religion, which is simply a reflection of our First Amendment protected guarantees of our rights to assemble and petition government for redress of grievances and freedom of speech and assembly. These are every bit as important as anything else. And even though it's number 10, it's as important as number 1. If you don't have freedom of speech and assembly, then you no longer have any peaceful recourse whatsoever for correction of government abuse. We have quite a few who have joined. Out of 10,000 current members we have right now, a fair number are active duty. But a lot of them are kind of staying under the radar because they're concerned about being purged or persecuted. And so I always tell them, don't worry. I don't care if you officially join or not. The main thing is you keep your oath. It's there as the antidote against obedience, blind obedience to the man on the white horse, whether he be a general, whether he be a president, whoever he is. And they understood that people will be tempted to go along and just do as they're told. This is just the tendency of men in uniform. So the oath is there as an antidote to make sure that it reminds them of their obligations.
Governments are notorious for creating panic to get public support for legislation and emergency measures that the population would not otherwise consider. The United States government is no different. Whether it concerns war with other nations, battling a disaster in our own country, or control over the population during natural or health emergencies, governments instill fear to coerce the population to give up their rights in order to cooperate. The mainstream media is complicit in exciting panic among the people as well. The media's role during the H1N1 flu scare was clear.
Swine flu normally infects pigs, but this virus is a new strain.
These are a new swine influenza virus. They're new for pigs and they are new for people.
The plans are already in place to force the non-compliant public to cooperate. You can be removed from your home, by force if necessary, mandatorily quarantined and vaccinated against your will. Your children can be removed from schools and taken to safe yet undisclosed locations until it is deemed safe for their return. This is all under the guise of protecting our nation. What has happened to our free country?
What an evil world.
Little by little, we are losing our constitutional rights, yet most Americans are paying little or no attention. People do not understand that these egregious powers are not being proposed. They are already in place, ready for federal, state, or local officials to act upon during a state of emergency. You will not get a say. You will lose your freedom to speak out. You will lose your right to privacy as troops force their way into your home to search without a warrant. You will lose your right to be secure in your home, even if you have plenty of supplies and are prepared to stay. You will lose your right to be armed as troops go door to door, person to person, confiscating your legally owned firearms. You will see military in the streets of this country carrying out the will of an unrestrained government as they round up free U.S. citizens. Some state governments pass measures to forcibly quarantine residents, incarcerate those who refuse to be vaccinated, and to forcibly vaccinate your children. Legislation like this passed during the much-hyped H1N1 flu outbreak. Training has already occurred to carry out many of these measures, reminiscent of the forcing from their homes and the internment of U.S. citizens during World War II. All of this has already happened on U.S. soil. How will you be able to defend your family? How will you react when they cart your children off to an undisclosed location because the government thinks it can protect your children better than you? Will your family's survival be up to you, or will it be up to an out-of-control government and its alphabet agencies, most of which have failed the American people over and over again? Are you going to blindly follow a government that has shown time and time again it has no respect for your constitutional rights? These rights are inalienable. They cannot be taken, and we cannot give them up. Yet Congress and various administrations encroach on our rights all the time. Will you give up your family willingly? Will you voluntarily become a captive of one of these quarantine or detention camps? What will you do? Will you go quietly?
This is the total federalization / internationalization with this huge control grid that is meant to protect the establishment from the people as they expand their tyranny. Because they expect for you to resist them as this corruption expands, as a rebellion forms against this Hitlerian takeover. And you're going to be named, you're going to be listed as a terrorist because you don't submit to them and become their slave.
It's all happening, lights, cameras, action.
All right, so that's going to end part 5 of our series. And I just want to, again, reiterate a Christian's responsibility in the face of something like this. We want to be wise as serpents, innocent as doves. We want to be wise, discerning, and watchful, aware of what's going on, understanding precautionary measures to take, but innocent, non-violent, peaceful. We are children of peace. We bring a message of reconciliation, understanding that it might cost our lives, it might cost us our freedoms. And we're okay with that. That's the agreement we've made with our Lord Jesus Christ. And so the wisdom is watch your surroundings, especially in times of national emergency. Don't trust the media. Don't, everything they say, basically the opposite is true. Understand that it's a propaganda machine of the New World Order, just hyping hysteria and compliance. So tune that out. It's all nonsense. Watch the world. Understand that your government, whether right or left, whether it's Republican or Democrat in power, conservative or liberal, whatever, it's under the ownership of the New World Order system. They're not to be trusted. All right. Even if their rhetoric is saying good things, their actions are doing others. It's like a person who says they're a Christian, but yet they're living a debauched life. The fruit is evident in the actions. And we can look at the fruit of our governments, regardless of who's in power. There's a continual demoralization of America. There's a continual advancement of the New World Order empire. There's a continual advancement of suppression of rights, a continual advancement towards a persecution of Christianity. And that's regardless of who's in power, because it's under the same management system, the same ownership, just different styles of management. So understand that, and then be prepared. Don't go to big protests. That's where they're going to get you, and they're going to lock you in camps. Don't voluntarily go to some government ghetto. If your bank gets cut off, you're starving. Oh, trust the Lord. Do what you can. Don't go turn yourself into the New World Order system. Avoid them. If there's lockdowns, avoid highways, avoid big populaces. Don't go where there's big crowds. That's the wisdom. And the innocence is we don't resist with violence. We're not going to fight. You can't fight evil with evil. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. We continue to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ regardless of the cost, knowing that it is only through faith in Jesus Christ that anybody will be saved from this system, this worldwide system that we're stuck in, this matrix that we live in of this authoritarian New World Order. The only way people will be brought out of that is to have their souls saved. And then it doesn't matter if we live or die. It doesn't matter if we're in prison camps or whatever. We just preach the gospel. We live a peaceable life, preach the gospel, try to avoid the tyranny, try to avoid the danger, but trust the sovereign hand of God. If you get caught, if you're put into a prison camp, it's okay. Don't fear. Don't allow fear to dictate your actions, because people in fear neglect the biblical principles. Then if you're in fear, that's when people start pulling out guns and shooting because they're afraid. Don't be like that. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. Trust God. Trust his sovereign hand over you. Whether you live or die, it's okay. You have eternal life coming. This life it doesn't mean anything. It's here and gone. You know, it's we're done like that. 70, 80 years is over, and you're, you know, in 100 years from now, everything you've done will be forgotten. All your bills, all your finances, all your debt, everything will be gone. All your stresses, all your worries, nobody will remember it. Think 100 years ago, there was an entirely different population on this earth, and virtually none of them are remembered. None of what they've done is remembered, you know, except for a few key historical figures, and then we only get, you know, a few lines in a textbook about them. We don't know their daily struggles and thoughts and what their home life was like. That's all just done away with. It's meaningless. You know, it's all just even our own lives. You know, I heard somebody say we live forgotten lives. If you think back, almost all of your life is forgotten. You know, you don't remember what you were doing on March 13th, 2012, you know, unless some significant key event happened. You don't remember your thoughts from 2 months ago. You don't remember, you know, your daily activities and things like that. It's just everything's forgotten. It's all meaningless. Only what's done for eternal purposes lasts. Only souls last. If we proclaim the glories of God, it's through the power of the Word of God that people are saved. If God peradventure will use us and use our words to save a soul, that soul gets to go on into eternity. That lasts forever. And so we live in that mindset, not fighting back evil with evil, living in peace, trying to live a quiet and peaceable life as much as possible, not fearing the tyranny, speaking the truth of God, avoiding the conflict, avoiding the chaos as much as possible. That is our goal. That is our response to this. So with all that said, like I said, that wraps up part 5. I want to give you a couple other, if you want to look more into this martial law thing. We watched Alex Jones's Police State 4, Rise of FEMA. So there was 3 documentaries done before that. You can go back and watch those. Some of them are poor quality, low budget, things like that, but still good information. The first one was in 2000, so it's called Police State 2000. And then there's Police State 2 and Police State 3. You can go watch America Destroyed by Design. You can watch a documentary by Tex Mars called Gulag USA. You can watch American Dictators. I think that's a Alex Jones production, and Masters of Terror. And then there's a subsection that we're not going to get into because I think it's not really, what's the word? It's not really significant to the pattern we're going through, but it is an interesting side topic to give you additional information, additional knowledge. It's kind of a branch off of the path we're going here. We're developing this worldview, and so I have to be selective in what we go over. A lot of it's kind of boring, but if you're interested in learning more, this would have been part 6, but I just didn't think it fit the flow. It's basically government cover-ups, looking at the different things that they've done. So you can go and watch Alex Jones in London. It's just called Alex in London. I think that was after the July 2007 train bombing. You can watch Bloodstained Hands. I can't remember what that one's about. I think it's about military deceptions or something, getting us involved in unjust wars. I'm not sure. Painful Deceptions. Wake Up or Waco, which is about Waco, Texas. Conspiracy of Silence. Project Lucid, I think that's another Tex Mars one. JFK 2, which might be, I think most of these are Alex Jones productions. The Oklahoma City bombing, that one's Alex Jones, I think. Secret Wars of the CIA. Financial Reports, that's an Alex Jones one. And then there's just a documentary that I have. It's untitled. It's just Alex Jones from April 14th, 2006. So write those down, make note of them, watch them. We would have, if I thought they were prudent to what we're doing here, this would have been the part where, this would have been the section where we would have worked those in. I just don't think it's necessary. But again, if you want to learn more, if you want to do more research on your own, go and watch those. And then we're going to be starting part 6 next time, which is looking at the New World Order in totality. Some of these, they're similar, so I didn't really know how to address the phase. We got phase 1, the gospel; phase 2, creation, evolution debate; phase 3, the American Empire; phase 4, the 9/11 cover-up; phase 5, martial law; and then this phase 6 is the New World Order, where we're looking at the, not just the American Empire, but the goals, the expansion of that worldwide. A lot of it focused in on America, because these are American-made documentaries, so that's going to be the viewpoint. We're seeing the tyranny here, but it's understanding that it's a broader agenda, understanding that this is a worldwide conspiracy, as the Bible calls it, a beast system. So we're going to be looking at the formation of this beast system, what the goals are, what their agenda is, how they plan on achieving it. And we're going to be looking at Matrix of Evil, which is, I think, Alex Jones; Terror Storm, which is Alex Jones; Endgame, which is Alex Jones. It's got a lot of good stuff on New World Order. The Obama Deception, which is Alex Jones; Fall of the Republic, which is Alex Jones; Invisible Empire, which I think it's a Cloud9 production, if I remember right. I think it's a Christian documentary, but really good information. Shadow Government, which I might be getting those two mixed up. It might be along the same lines as Invisible Empire. Dark Clouds, I don't remember what. Oh, that's is that Dark Clouds over the Georgia Guidestones, which were recently blown up. And that was a weird event that happened there. Somebody blew up the Guidestones. But we're going to watch a documentary on that. New World Order, Blueprint of Mad Men. Can't remember who made that. I think I just randomly came across it on YouTube, and it was a phenomenal production, really good information. The Beginner's Guide to the New World Order, again, another YouTube production, not sure who made it. And Satan's New World Order is what we'll end with, which again is just phenomenal. Those last 3, there's a lot of good ones in here. The ones we're going to go through are good, and then there's some really good ones in here as well. And then once that's done, that's going to take us a long time. That's the most we've done in one section. I think that's 3, 6, 9. That's 11 documentaries. Some of them are like 3 hours long, so it's probably going to be 3 sections each. So we're probably looking at like 20 to 30 episodes here just in that section. And then we'll get into part 4, which is the occult foundations. And we've got a lot there too. Probably another 30 videos on that. And then we'll go into part 8, which is the media cover-up. We've got 6 documentaries to watch on that, how the media is involved in this. And then we're going to look into the banking system, and because that's really the power of the New World Order, is, he who controls the money controls the world. And then part 10, we're going to look at population control. One of their agendas is to limit the population. It's easier to control us if there's less of us. And one of their goals is to maintain population under 500 million, which means they want to reduce the population by like 95%. And so we're going to look at some of the means by which they're trying to do that. They use something called a slow kill. Slowly poison people so that there's not an alertness. If all of a sudden, millions of people started dropping dead everywhere, people would be on like, what is going on, and they would want answers, and there would be revolt. So what they do is they introduce slow kills. They cancer rates are skyrocketing. Autism, easier to control people with autism, skyrockets. And so there's subsections to this. It's called population control is the part, and then we're going to look at the medical field. We're going to look at water. We're going to look at the air. We're going to look at our food. We're going to look at schools, indoctrination. And then psychology. And then part 11, we're going to look at the Bible version issue. It's a critical issue, and you'll see why when we get there. And then part 12, we're going to look at the pre-tribulation rapture error and how that's setting people up for a false hope. And then part 13, we're going to look at the signs of the times, biblical signs that show us, give us a general idea of where we are on this prophetic clock. And then there's several others that I just haven't figured out where to fit in, or I haven't watched them yet. So I have to watch those ahead of time to see whether or not we're going to include them. But we've got a long ways to go. I mean, we're 80 into this, and we've probably got 120 to 150 more episodes. So we're gonna get to, like, Lord willing, if the Lord allows us the time to tarry. I mean, we're years into this now. Episode 80. You know, we're probably gonna be putting out 250 episodes, somewhere in there, depending on what I decide with these other documentaries. But I enjoy this. I've often told people, you know, I do several different ministries. I don't know if you'd call it a ministry. It's just I believe that as Christians, we are compelled to share what God shows us in His Word, what God reveals to us through His Word, as He gives us knowledge and understanding. You know, we're all gifted in various different ways, and so the Lord's going to reveal things in the Scriptures to you that He might not reveal to me or to somebody else. It's our duty, as He reveals these things, to put it back out into the community, to be witnesses, to shine a light. You know, we don't hide a light under a shade. We put it on the table for everybody to see, and Jesus has called us to do that. And so as God reveals things to you and lays things on your heart, it's our duty to put it back out. And I feel like we should be laboring for the kingdom as much as possible, because everything else is pointless. We're not here to do the 9 to 5 to make a paycheck. We have to do that because we have bills to pay. But our job, our goal, is to proclaim the glories of Christ, to tell people, look, you ain't getting out of here alive. You know, we're all going to die, whether it's the beast system or something else. We all have an end point, and what comes after is eternal. And so you must be born again, and having, because God has opened our eyes, because God would graciously, you know, we're not better than anybody else. We deserve the same fate they do, but for God's purposes and His holy wisdom, He chose to enlighten us. He chose to open our eyes, to show us the truth. We went from that kingdom of darkness where we were wrapped up in this world just like everybody else, just blindly plugging along, and then God took us and changed course direction, said, nope, serve me. And because He's done that, it is our duty. We owe it to the world. We owe it to everybody else to tell them. And so we proclaim these things. And so I do that mainly through social media. I feel like social media is today's public square. It's where people gather and where people share ideas and where you can express things and where people learn. And so, you know, I do Facebook Live videos, just going through the Word of God. I do a weekly podcast, just sharing my own journey, my own spiritual walk, and my struggles and my failures and my perseverance because of God's grace. And, you know, do several other teaching things, just going through the Word. Again, not that I'm anything special, not that I have any special calling or gift. It's just, again, as God reveals things to me, as I'm reading the Scriptures and the light bulb goes off, and God has revealed to me a truth in the Scriptures, it is now my duty to put it back out. Like, a joy isn't fully expressed until you put it back out. It's there's this old expression, I think I heard Pastor John Piper say it, if you're really into a sport, you know, let's say you're watching a football game and your team has an amazing play and scores a touchdown, and you just sit there and Your joy isn't fulfilled. It's not until you go yes and celebrate that your joy is the expression of it is part of the joy. It's then the joy is fulfilled. And so as God reveals things to us, if we just hold that in, like I can't hold that in. I have to express it. I want to share it with others. I want you to see what I see. I need you to, you should see the glories. What good is it for me to keep it to myself? Look and see. Look how amazing this is, so we can celebrate together. That's the whole purpose. There's this other analogy of the difference between the Red Sea and the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea has no life in it. None at all. That's why it's called the Dead Sea. The Red Sea has an abundance of life, aquatic life in it. The difference between the two is that the Dead Sea has inflowing rivers and tributaries, but no outflowing. The Red Sea has both inflowing and outflowing, and it keeps it alive and vibrant. So as the Lord puts into us, we have to put back out. Otherwise, we're dying. Like, I cannot... my brothers, one of my brothers will often tell me, he has this idea that our sin should prevent us from sharing because it makes us hypocrites. And I disagree with that totally, because I am a sinner, and I don't hide that, and that therefore I don't think I'm a hypocrite. I try to be transparent and tell people I am a sinner too, but I can't keep my mouth shut. I have to express these glories. And I think this particular series we're doing here, Developing a Proper Worldview, I think it's my to phrase it in a secular way, it's like my lifetime achievement or whatever. That sounds just ridiculous and foolish. It's not me. It's I feel like this is the best thing I've done. Like, I feel like this is, I don't know if you could say most important, because the gospel is paramount. The gospel is most important. This is the issue that I feel like the Lord has led me down a path and shown me things and revealed things to me and granted me understanding. And this is the expression of it in totality. Like this is my legacy, so to speak. If I die, hopefully we get through these before the Lord takes me home. But hopefully these videos will just stay out there for who knows how long. I don't know how long YouTube will be around, or how long it'll be before they censor all this stuff, but it's important, I guess, is the bottom line. These videos are important. They're very, very important. I enjoy doing them. I hope you enjoyed as well. And Lord willing, you're taking this in with spiritual understanding, going and doing your own research, being on guard, being cautious. So anyways, we got a long ways to go. So as always, I truly appreciate you guys watching. I love you, and Lord willing, we'll talk to you next time.